But I really liked of all of those courses, obviously I liked the gender studies one the most. I really liked that course. It was really funny too, because at the time, obviously, it was pre-transition. So it was just me in the classroom and everyone else was just, either like LGBT or a woman. And I was just the only person just chilling, you know? It was funny. At that time, that was very funny. What I get the most out of, definitely the gender studies course. What I learned about in gender studies, a lot of it was a good amount of history. A good amount of history about like civil rights stuff, especially with like a Canadian perspective, because it was, you know, it's a Canadian school. We learned a good amount about the history of like, there was a whole section on, well, there's a lot, okay, because it's an intro course, so they don't spend a lot of time on things. They basically have, you know, like one topic every, I almost did PN stream. In fact, I might do Notepad stream actually, and just because I can put it up here, you know. But it was like, you know, like 1 week was like, I think it was a 13-week course, or was it 2 years? I don't remember. One or the other, you know? It was one of those two. But it was like 13 weeks or something, and it was like, you know, it was like 13-week course, and it was like first week, intro, then it was like, you know, 2 was like women's rights, 3, you know, 3 was like, I don't fucking know. There was a week on disabled, like disabled people's issues. I don't know how, you know, disability. We'll just call it disability. There was a topic on ageism. There was a topic on queer. Oh God, there was a word. I should know this, but I don't remember it actually for some reason. Queer theory. Queer theory. Queer theory. There was a topic on Indigenous people, because Canada's been pretty shit about that. So it was an Indigenous people topic. Were there any cishet guys in the class? I was the only cis guy in the class. I was the only one. There was an Indigenous. I begged my friend I begged my one cis friend to go and take it with me though. Like I begged him. There was a topic about like, I don't know what the word is, I guess. There's obviously a week on race. There was, you know, a topic about like intersectionality. I don't know if I remember any other ones, but this is like kind of what it was. And a lot of it was like history, you know, like history of women's rights, you know. This is like disability models. So like, there was like the social model of disability, I think it's called. I think that's what it's called, but I don't remember actually, I'm sorry. I don't remember if that's what it's called. Exactly. There was a section on ageism, included media, presentation of ageism. And I think that one was one thing I remember from that was which stuck with me actually, even after all this time, was the like talk about like the depiction of like aging in like the population, especially the depiction of aging for like, for women as well. The difference in how, for example, that like thought, you know, that narrative of like men, you know, there's the silver fox, you know? The silver fox, oh, men age like fine wine. Like, you know, older men are hot. Old men are hot. Old men are attractive. They're valuable. They're, you know, they have important roles to play in our society. They're leaders, you know, they're leaders. And like in like movies, there's, you know, there's acting, you know, acting roles for older men. You know, a lot of the, like a lot of protagonists and stuff, you know, can be older men. It's totally okay. Whereas for women, you know, there's the idea that as women age, they lose value. There is no like silver fox for women. You know, there's no old leaders for women. Women have instead, like, ageism affects women very differently. In media, for example, when we think of like villains as well. This does apply like a little bit, but like to both genders and stuff, or you know. But like we think of like Disney villains, okay? The Disney villains will be like older than the protagonists. That's the, you know, the evil stepmother archetype, the evil witch, the crone. Historically, older women have been presented as like an evil thing in media. They've been presented as like an actual evil thing, you know? Whereas in media, like sometimes older men are presented as villains, like especially if I think of like Disney, you know, there's usually like if I think of, but usually there's like, the difference is, if I think of like, what's a good movie, for example? Let's say we take another Disney movie. Let's take, let's take Hercules. That's a Disney movie, right? So the villain in Hercules is Hades, who's like an older man, but contrasted simultaneously with Hades is the Zeus, who's also an older man, but a positive example of the older man. So you have like the young guy protagonist, and you have the bad older man, but you also have the contrasted like good older man, you know? Whereas if you think of something, I guess like Snow White or what's the one, Rapunzel? What's the Rapunzel one? Tangled? It's like the, you know, the evil old stepmother, you know? So there's rarely a like, I guess there's like the fairy godmother sometimes. So it's like, it's confusing, you know? It's just, yeah, it's just a thing where like, it's just a subtle thing, I guess, but it's like, it's a thing I think important to keep in mind, that you're kind of conditioned to be afraid of aging, you know? And it affects women a little bit differently than it affects men, you know? Or it affects feminine people differently than it affects masculine people. Because femininity is intrinsically associated with youthfulness. Femininity is like associated with youthfulness. So aging is necessarily like an attack on your femininity in a way. So it's just an important thing to keep in mind, obviously. Then we learned a good amount. I mean, intersectionality was intersectionality is an obvious thing, I think, but it's something that like, it's really important for everyone to know. Can you ask the question? Go ahead. Intersectionality is so important for everyone to know because, I mean, it affects literally everything. It affects literally everything. It's super important. The challenge with intersectionality that I've heard, the criticism of it, is that if you get too hyper-specific, then it becomes impossible to find broad solutions to issues, is one thing. But everyone knows intersectionality is important, you know? Whether or not, yeah, you knew about it before you actually heard the word. Well, everyone gets it instinctively. In marketing, they call it demographics, you know? In marketing, they understand intersectionality through demographics, or just in our lives, we understand intersectionality through like different friend groups in different situations. We all get it on like an instinctive level, I think. It makes a lot of sense, right? Like, but we learned kind of, I think, the history of the theory and stuff, how it sort of came to be. I think I heard about like, there was like a thing where it was in factory work, I believe. And in factory work, they had jobs for men and women, right? And the men worked in the factory and the women worked in the office. And that was like that was the thing, right? The men worked in the factory, the women worked in the office. That was the split. But then what they found was, when you looked at black women specifically, men were able to work in the factory, white and black men were allowed to work in the factory. But in the office, black women were not allowed to work in the office alongside white women. So if you take this as a blanket, yeah, Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term based around this. Yeah, this is just the history. I don't know, unfortunately I'm not super educated, but yeah, like if you think of it in terms of just women and men, and that's how you break apart, like how does this issue affect men? How does this issue affect women? You're gonna miss completely the fact that Black women are being completely left out here of this dynamic. The way I heard it explained was they had quotas to hire women and Black people, and they hired white women and Black men, but not Black women. Yeah, I think you're probably correct. The way I understood it was that like they had roles that it was acceptable to put Black men into, but they had no place essentially they had no place where they were able to like hire Black women. I think the thing that I remember that was important was that like I think one of the criticisms I remember intersectionality though is that like you can break down so hard on each of like the lines, right? You can get like so deep into it. You can base off of location, like area, race, gender, age, income, and all of these things, like parental income as well. And you can kind of like separate groups into these ultra specific groups, and you can do that for like everyone, and you'll find obviously that everyone essentially is their own unique person. Ultimately, everyone is their own unique person. However, if you start getting the critic, I think the critic is that if you get that hyper specific, how do I make a policy, like how do I make a federal policy that does something good, blanket for like a good amount of people, if I get too hyper specific, Sometimes you do have to sort of accept the fact that like you can't be nuanced in every single area. Sometimes you just gotta like, if you have a policy that helps all women, it's gonna help some women more than others. Some women may not even need it whatsoever. Some may need it a lot more than you're actually helping them. There's no good federal policy in your opinion. I don't think I agree, because I think sometimes we need to have rules that people don't want, Like, I think of federal policy in the same way that I think of, like, maybe stuff like, let's not do war crimes, If every country in the world can agree that, like, not every country in the world, but if a big group of countries can get together and agree that, like, war crimes are, like, blanket not okay, I think then I think that's a good thing, because I think it's good for some areas to tell other areas you're not allowed to. There are some things that are good that you can tell places that may not actually want it, that they can't do it, I think personally, some things are definitely bad on a federal level, if that makes sense. But I think some things are quite good on a federal level, Like, I personally don't think, like, with, like, abortion rights. Now, again, obviously I'm going to have an opinion on it that may not line up with, like, a huge portion of America, I guess. But I think it's probably a good thing if states aren't allowed to decide on a case-by-case basis about abortion stuff. I feel like it would be better to be a federal thing, personally, I think, like, there's probably things similar to that I can't think of exactly off the top of my head. That's the first one that came to mind.